Nvidia has now surpassed Apple as the most valuable company in the world at a market cap of $3.37 trillion.
The company's insane. That company
What?
is just, yeah, insane.
Like, that's like the GDP of multiple countries.
One, two, three, four.
Welcome to the Automated Lawyer Podcast. I am one of your hosts, John Fritz, and I'm joined with my co-host, Dan Schnurbush. Dan, what's going on today?
Not a lot, John. What's going on? Just enjoying the last few days of warmth. We're getting ready to start refinishing my basement, which I'm super stoked about. We're gonna have a new play area for the kids, and I'm thinking of going full Instagram and putting like monkey bars on the ceiling and stuff. And I've gotten the kids hyped up, so at this point, like, I don't know if I can backtrack on that. But we're pretty excited. So that's been occupying a lot of my bandwidth the past week or so.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because at my old house, we finished our basement during COVID, and we had a climbable gym in the basement, just like that. Monkey bars, there's a rope, climbing rope. It's something you just buy on Amazon, right? And it's
Uh-huh.
you can get the bolt to the wall, but I'll tell you what, worth every penny because, the kids absolutely loved it. And then we recently moved and no climbing gym. And so my wife and I were like, well, we need that climbing gym again because it's gold, the
Yeah.
kids absolutely. I mean, it's good for their, they can get that energy out, right? Swing on it and climb
Yeah.
on it and do all that stuff they need to do, especially during the winter. So
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing. Now we're going into winter. We're like, well, they don't want to. I mean, you can bundle them up, but they go out in the back and they just kind of toddle around for a minute, and they're like, I'm cold and bored. And right. So that's a good endorsement. Maybe we will go through with the interior thing, but yeah, it's that's been exciting. So I'm thinking about general contracting it myself a little bit and putting the pieces together. I'm a little handy and enjoy that stuff. So we'll see where it goes, but
definitely should.
yeah.
The general contracting stuff is it's only time consuming, but it's not hard.
Yep. Gonna have a new kitted out office space. I'm gonna soundproof the heck out of it, so I have my own recording studio, which is gonna be very exciting. So we'll have crystal clear audio. Anyway, so today we're gonna talk a little bit about AI and automation in marketing. Kind of some interesting ways that the two of us have been finding to deploy, AI, ChatGPT, whatever fun things we're playing with, and interested to hear other people's thoughts and ideas too. Facebook group, wherever you can find a place to give feedback, it would be very interesting to hear other people's thoughts. But that's what we're going to talk about today. I do want to give a couple of interesting news tidbits because things have been just as usual, very interesting and very high paced, very strange in the world, especially the world of AI. And just to go through a couple real quick. So GPT's O1 model. So right now, we're working with the O1 preview model is the best thing we're getting out of O1. And it's very smart, right? It tells you it's thinking as it's going through. Well, O1 is kind of the Papa version of that model. If that's the baby version, this is the granddad version that's got the whole kit and caboodle, all those awesome like science and math scores and stuff like that they showed off in their paper. That's all from the big model, not from the preview model. So we actually haven't even really unlocked what it's like yet to have, thinking models at scale. So I'm very interested to see how we'll be able to use that in the API in like thinking about complicated legal problems, especially once you can train these and fine tune them with like Eleanor style data. Like, could you imagine like how well it's going to be able to reason when Eleanor has the brain of O1 instead of 4.0?
Do you think that the O1 and once the main kind of function set comes out, do you think it's going to replace the 4.0 eventually? And it works. I mean, they're totally different. It's like night and day when you enter the same question and when you get the results.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the use case because like you can't use a thinking model like in a low latency environment. Like if you're trying to, like let's say you're trying to build a voice chat model or something, like it's not gonna it's not going to work very well if you have to sit there and wait for, 30, 40 seconds before you get a response. So I
Yeah.
think there's still going to be a place for those, the 4.0 model, but the O1 preview or the O1 model, when you're trying to answer hard questions or get like a well thought out, like factually accurate answer, or one that follows constraints real accurately. Like if you have like, for example, I know you talked about Eleanor, you have all these different uh, parameters and, how you want it to think about different types of cases and stuff. O1 is going to be really good at that. And it is already good at that, but it's going to be even better. So for those use cases, I think it's going to be really exciting to see. But so O1's coming pretty soon. They're talking probably in the next month or two. There's been a lot of rumors about it being called Orion, but that's been kind of dispelled by Sam Altman. On the security side, Palantir, government defense contractor, is now using Claude 3.5, which is Anthropic's model, internally now for government, and it is now cleared for secret level clearance. So secret government information is now being parsed and run through a Claude model. So for people who are like, well, is this
That's scary.
Well, I find it very interesting, right? Because I believe it's like an on-premises deployment. So it's like not connected to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But so it's just this thinking agent that they can use to examine secret level clearance information inside their own systems, which is cool. So for people who are like freaking out about security and stuff, well, at least the government is pretty satisfied with it, and defense contractors in the defense industry are pretty satisfied with it. So I think that's cool and good news for AI.
Have you played with Claude a lot? I mean, I have actually not spent any time with it. How does it compare to, ChatGPT or the O1 preview or?
So I like Claude. I have used it quite a bit. There are two main things that it is much better at than OpenAI's models. Well, was much better at. One is coding. It was much better at coding than 4.0 model. And I used it for some custom code projects. That is not so true anymore now with O1 preview and O1 coming down the pike. But it is still really, really fast. So it is still better than 4.0 in terms of like spitting out code real fast. The other thing that it's better at is capturing kind of a writer's voice. So like one of the things we're going to talk about is marketing. And, if you're writing marketing content, and you have, especially if you have like existing content, like, oh, I wrote this page or I have this page professionally written. If you want to like capture that feel or that voice or that tone, Claude is going to be much better at doing that than ChatGPT for whatever reason. I don't know why. It's just, it sounds more like you. If you give it a sample, it sounds more like the sample than ChatGPT does. That's the other area that I've seen it being a lot better. But other than that, no, I'm like, let's just use OpenAI. They've got a tool for everything. And
yeah, I feel like the O1 preview is much, much better when it comes to more plain English in its writing, right? I think the 4.0 model is, it's trying to use too many big words and it sounds ridiculous. Even when, and then, like I said, O1 preview, you ask a question or essay, write a blog post, and it sounds much, much cleaner and more simple, right? And easier, just very to the point. And maybe because of the logic reasoning involved in that.
Yeah. I think it's just because of the system prompts that OpenAI applies to them in the background. Like you can obviously tweak all that with your own prompting, like, oh, I want you to write like I'm in 4th grade or something. But like off the rack prompts, people have said, you're not the first person to say that O1 is much more, factually to the point, straight into the point, succinct. It doesn't have the flowery, because it's more meant to be a reasoning model than a conversational model. It's because the outputs are pages long. Like that's not really meant for a conversation, right? It's meant to answer a complex question. So I think they've tuned it that way deliberately, but interesting. But the other, in a related piece, Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, was talking about how they're working very aggressively toward a new system where they'll be able to create like a fluid intelligence layer, where rather than having to choose between all these different models, they'll all be kind of organically integrated into one system that will kind of naturally navigate toward different parts of the model and which model is best. And it will just kind of learn to adapt and respond to the question depending on like the types of knowledge that are needed to answer it. Just as a way of like dramatically simplifying, uh, dealing with all these models and how do we
Yeah, and that's
make the most out of
when
it.
you had mentioned that before, when we talked about it 2 minutes ago about, Wolf, 4.0 replacing or one or the other, and
Yeah.
that's kinda where I was going with it, is like, there has to be, because, if you don't know, you don't know when it comes to, which one to use, right? And they're constantly coming out with new ones. It'd be like, "Hey, this would be really nice if there was one prompt, box where you type in your information and it just auto selects, or it, goes to the right, the right model in the behind the scenes, so you're not having to, select, oh, I'm going to go to
Yeah.
this one for complex reasoning, or I want to go to this one because it's, and like the data sets are different too. I mean, I was putting in data sets into 4.0 and the preview model, right? They're asking questions of very specific stuff. Um, like who's the best probate lawyer in Missouri and St. Louis? And don't worry, I appeared in the top 3 of both models, but um,
Oh, well, congratulations. I still need to figure out how to game the ChatGPT search results.
No, but one of them was one of the data sets said, it said like, "Oh, my data goes back to like 2023," and then the other one was even, 2022. I think 4.0 model was. So they're even working on different data sets when it comes to, the public, more
Yeah.
advanced, more information at a more relevant date. So, which could be relevant to your search depending on what you're actually searching for or what you're looking to accomplish with it. So,
Yeah. Speaking of search, ChatGPT search just launched like, I think it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, where now it was already there to a point, but they've really significantly improved the search interface for ChatGPT now. So like if you ask a question to the 4.0 model, it will, decide whether it needs to go search the internet to answer your question. So like, yeah, its training data cuts off in whatever, August of 22 or October 23, whatever it is. Um, but now it can go and search and get live results.
oh, okay.
Um, yeah, and the thing that is, it has like a little globe. If you log into ChatGPT, the app, you can see the little globe on the chat bar. If you click that, that forces ChatGPT to use the um the internet search. It doesn't. Otherwise, it just kind of dynamically decides. But one thing I found that's really neat about it is that it can somehow like, I mean, I guess 'cause it's a computer, it can check like 10 different websites in like a fraction of a second and return interesting summaries and results of all the articles in like the fraction of a second. Whereas for us to like scroll through and click on each one of those and read it, it would take a lot of time. So very, very cool in terms of retrieving real-time data from blogs and websites and news outlets and yada, yada, yada.
Have you
Um,
have you I mean, have you done a Google search recently? I mean, just in Google. I mean, I know that there's lots of other tools out there now. But I mean, Google's
yeah,
AI response is gotten better and better and better.
yeah,
And there's a lot of people talking about before about, well, are people going to use ChatGPT as the new search engine? And Google's going to be, it's like, come on, Google's going to adapt, and function and do whatever they can to stay number one as a search engine, right? So that's what they're doing is, they're trying to answer your question in one answer, right, at the very top, as opposed to you having to scroll and search through stuff, which, obviously makes a lot of
yeah,
sense from a perspective of digesting the information and coming up with a response.
yeah. And if ChatGPT search is rolled out to your client yet, one of the things that it will prompt you to do when you log in is to install the Chrome extension so that ChatGPT will replace your Google search in your Chrome bar, which I tried a little bit. I found it to be, maybe it's just that I'm not used to it, but I found it to be a little annoying.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just want to see the Google results, and it wouldn't let you do that. Uh, so yeah, Google, you're absolutely right though. They're doing a pretty good job of trying to integrate that modeling as quickly as they can to get you answers. And speaking of which, the other thing that's been kind of interesting is to see how these companies kind of diverge in their approach to what they're doing. Like Google, it was announced they're trying to launch before the holiday season. They're trying to launch AI agents inside of like a Google product and an AI agent, if you're not familiar, is basically the idea that you can instruct it with a task and it can break apart that task into any sub pieces that need to be executed and then sequentially like run through each of those. Whereas now it's just like input answer, get back, or input question, get back answer. So now it's going to be more of a, sequence style execute on complex tasks. So they're hoping to launch that apparently before the holiday season, so it can allegedly will be able to like uh, buy your plane tickets for you and do your holiday shopping for you if you give it enough context, which is very interesting. I don't think anybody else is working on anything like that right now, but
I think it's a great idea, at least for purposes of coming up with, gift ideas. Like, I like to think outside the box a little bit when it comes to gifts and not give people the same stuff every single year. But if you could put in some, like basic parameters, like what this person likes, maybe like, just some personal details, right, about them as a
yeah,
human being, and then saying like, hey, listen, or like activities they like what's a great idea for this year for a Christmas gift, and that might be
yeah,
interesting to see what it does.
yeah. I've used it in years past, but now that it can actually search, not only can it give you good answers, but it can actually look on the internet and find weird stuff, like those, those unusual kind of gifts. I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point with the holiday
Or
season.
pricing too. If you're like, "Hey, this place has it for $8.99 or,
Mm,
$199," like, is there anywhere out there that's selling that reputable that's selling it for cheaper, right? I don't like that's a potential use case as well.
yeah. Yep. Very, very, very interesting stuff. And because all this is getting so big, it is actually driven. There was a report that Nvidia has now surpassed Apple as the most valuable company in the world at a market cap of $3.37 trillion.
The company's insane. That company
Which
is just yeah, insane.
like, that's like the GDP of multiple countries. Uh, uh,
Yeah.
just just wild. Um, so let's shift gears a little bit. So how can we deploy some of this stuff in marketing? I've had a lot of fun with it. Have you experimented at all with AI in marketing in your firm?
Yeah, I mean, most recently, I work with, kind of a marketing company that does kind of just some, like, one-off projects for me whenever I wanna do certain things, and, um but they were like, "Hey, we can do some AI assisted content, and write some new content for your website, for SEO and stuff like that." I'm like, "Okay, great." Relatively cheap overall, and they came back with like, 10 pages, right? It was like 10 good pages of different things that I'm working on, and it was just terrible. It was just terrible. I mean, and I know what they did. They probably went to the 4.0 model and entered in like it's probably pulling stuff, it's probably literally pulling stuff from Fritz Law, like my company, like it's super old or, whatever. But it just listed, it talked about and this, it talked about estate planning and, this and that. And I'm like, I don't do estate planning. I'm 100% probate, right?
Yeah.
So it was not good. And a lot of the verbiage and everything was just really bad. It was like, well, well, the sophisticated, like just all these big words and like it's like people don't want to
Yeah.
go to a website and have to read 5 of 6 words being big words, right? It wants to be very short, simple, easy to read, succinct.
Yeah.
So I went back to them and I was like, yeah, you got to redo this. This is not good. And then they went and redid it and it was a little bit better because it was more targeted of what we actually do and probate focused. And then I went into Eleanor and typed in the same exact prompts that I thought that they probably used, and it produced a million times better pages that are SEO optimized. I mean, you just basically tell it, create
Yeah.
a blog post that is SEO optimized, that focuses on, that are written for a law firm website that, I mean, very detailed prompts,
Yeah.
and it spits out, like, really great stuff, and like I said, it's probably I mean, no one has access to Eleanor but me, and so it's all, the gold standard in probate, so it's very specific to Missouri, so I'm not having to go in and, like, the
Uh-huh.
4.0 model might say something like, "Oh, well, you have just different timelines in probate that are not accurate," right? Or,
Right.
like, responsibilities of the PR might not be accurate,
Right.
so that's how I started using it, but how about yourself?
Yeah. 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 Well, I ran into that exact problem. Is the internet's getting flooded with like artificial intelligence, hot garbage. And it's so easy to do that like everybody's like churning it out. The problem is a lot of it is so banal and generic. And like you said, it's just not, a lot of times it's not accurate. Or you have to do as much work like fact checking the post as you do like actually would have had to do just writing it. Um, so to solve for that, and I cannot bring myself to sit down and just write blog posts. So what I've been working on is it's almost done and it's generally functional at this point. Is I built an app. It's a monstrosity, but basically every Monday it live fetches hot keyword data relative to probate and like the basically the search volume, yada yada yada, and then saves that back to an AI database. And then we can create a topic in the database. Like if you want to create a topic based on the keyword data, you can just click a button and it will generate a bunch of keyword optimized topics. And then you can click a different button and it will generate a blog and a script and other things. Well, what makes it like so cool is that in writing the blog, which is done on Claude, um, it first pulls 4 different AI models pulling data from 4 different databases. So it will fetch in a case law and statutory vector store database. So on OpenAI's platform is just filled with Missouri statutes on probate and yada yada yada. And we have a second database filled with all of our historical blog content. And we have a third database stored with all the keyword data. And then a fourth one is using Perplexity, which is basically another search AI that is asked to go out and fetch timely statistics or relevant news headlines relative to the topic. So it's pulling in, it's asked to fetch in relevant statutes, relevant historical blogs in our system, and the links to them, and relevant keywords and relevant timely topics and other things. And then with all of that background, then write the blog. And it has dramatically changed like the quality of the output. Because like what you get out now is a, properly cited blog to real statutes and mostly real cases. I need to fix that. And that contains preset, cross links to other blogs in your system, a lot of them. And, is based on up-to-date real-time keyword search traffic data. And then it gets pushed right into WordPress. It's just bananas. It's absolute bananas. I've been having so much fun with that.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I wonder how is it factually accurate on the back end? I mean, when you're actually reading it, or is it kind of like, well, this and that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. I have noticed it like hallucinating uh, the wrong statute numbers sometimes, and I think the reason is because of the way that I'm storing the knowledge in the database. I've just been like uploading like Word documents of the statutes,
Yeah.
and the problem is that if you don't do like custom chunking of the text, OpenAI just basically takes the document and breaks it up into chunks. And where it breaks those chunks is based on semantic meaning. It's not necessarily connecting the language to like a statutory header. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like it may not know that this block of text belongs to, section 437, whatever.
Yeah.
Unless you tell it that, and OpenAI's like native vector store platform just doesn't let you control metadata enough in terms of like defining, okay, well, this section belongs to this statute, yada, yada. So I have been getting a little bit of like the text of statutes is all correct, but sometimes it'll reference the wrong statutory section. So there's probably a way of fixing that. But the substance has been good, which is
Yeah.
the most important thing. I can usually fix the statutory section, but yeah, overall it's moving in the right direction, which is a lot of fun.
What are your thoughts? And I know some people out there are a little bit hesitant to use, OpenAI or just ChatGPT or any of the other sources for, blog writing because they're afraid that Google's going to identify it as being written by AI and then therefore devalue it or, you basically count against you. And I've never really been thought that that's a real thing. I mean, But I mean, I could tell if you're right. I mean, if it's just garbage content to start, you're gonna get devalued. But if it's truly accurate and it's written by AI, I don't see why it would cause any issues.
Yeah, I don't think that, anybody actually has a reliable way of determining AI from human written content. Like, a lot of people have tried, and there were a lot of platforms early on that claimed that they could detect AI written content, and it turned out that they just couldn't, and especially the more you add more context and more personalization to your prompts, the output is just too personalized for it to be, basic. Um, and by definition, like, every time you have a generation come out of a bot, it's a unique generation. It's never been generated before. So I just don't think they can detect it. I think you're absolutely right. That's what they're detecting is they're detecting crappy content.
Yeah.
And that stuff, is just getting penalized the same way it always has, or not penalized, but not boosted. It's just that now there's more crappy content out there. So to really stand out, I think you look at, I'm not an SEO expert, but you get out there and you see the type of stuff that generates search results is always well cited, very authoritative, detail oriented. It gives a lot of value. It's not generic, like, boring half answers to questions. It's like, this is how this works. Here's the piece that controls this. Here's what you should think about. So I think it's just more about just writing good stuff. And I think you can definitely get that
Well,
out of AI
even
models.
even ignoring the SEO piece, just having good quality content on your website for people to go through, or even if you're building something else. I mean, like you know, we have our booklet that I'm actually using now a lot more than I used. I mean, which is, what to do when a loved one passes away. It's a very nice PDF booklet that lists out, it provides a ton of value to people, right? Not just about probate, but just like basic logistical things, like when somebody
Mhm.
passes away, like there's a checklist in there, et cetera. So, I think it makes sense to either you're using it for SEO or you're using it to just build something of value for the client, right? To obviously use probably the O1 preview or now just O1, right? When it comes to building those things, because like I said, they're just I think just better from a writing standpoint. But yeah, no, I mean, you don't have to do basically sit there and produce content, right, anymore. I mean, like, now, on the flip side, though, I would argue that, like, things like LinkedIn posts or, Facebook posts, or if you're writing actual content for social media, I would say you can use it as a kind of a starting basis, but, I
Yeah.
mean, you can still tell when people are putting up AI generated content and people are just
Yeah.
like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks, right? So, I mean, that's the one thing that's my exception is that I always like my LinkedIn posts when I'm writing on LinkedIn. I'm always writing it from just basically from free thought writing, each week, and
Yeah.
then just editing it for a couple of minutes and then posting it. So it's never any AI assisted stuff from there because I think people can tell.
Yeah. I think they can. And I think that the main reason I think they can tell is because people, especially on LinkedIn, I have noticed is very people want to hear your stories. They want to hear your personal stories about stuff that you've gone through or that you're going through now, or a client that you helped, or a story about your past, or something you did with your dad, or da da da. Like, that's the kind of stuff that connects with people
Yeah.
on a real deep level and resonates and gets impressions and reactions and moves people emotionally and attracts them to you personally and your brand. And AI can't really, it's very difficult for AI to replicate that. Like, they aren't going to tell the story the same way that you would tell it necessarily, even if they know the story. Like, even if you give the model the whole context of the story, like, and I've experimented with this a little bit, it's just, it's not as authentic because especially anybody that knows you, they'll know, like, is this how this person would tell the story or anything like that. It's hard to replicate, because you're essentially trying to transfer something into somebody else's brain and have them tell the story the same way. And it's hard to do. So especially on LinkedIn, where people prioritize, personal connection and storytelling, I think you're absolutely right. I've seen that the AI generated content is not perform as well unless you make a lot of modifications to it.
Yeah, I mean, even just from an educational standpoint, like providing education about, your topic, like people don't want to see that anymore on LinkedIn. Like
Yeah.
they don't care about, I mean, I've posted, in the last year, I posted, kind of all over the spectrum on stuff. But the biggest, I mean, every single week, the most engagement, the most impressions is always just me sharing an insight or me talking about a topic that is specific to that week, right? Like it's just, and
Yeah.
that's what literally what I'm just, this week I'm like struggling with something or thinking about something that's just in my brain, right? And I just produce it on paper
Yep.
or on the computer. And then, but like no one wants to know about, what the timeline is to file a will or, the different
Yeah.
types of probate. Like no one cares. I mean, like
You're
they
right.
care when like when they're in the soup, right? And like if they need to like figure out which one, but again, they want you to do that because that's your job, but,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I have seen that absolutely is true. Like just generating like ordinary, boring, like reciting, here's the rules for this. Like people don't care about that. The one area I have seen people performing well in marketing where they are doing pure education is where they are educating a group of other people in the same or similar industry about a really complicated topic. Like I have seen a number of like, for example, estate and like tax planning practitioners who are generating content on like really advanced uh, estate and tax planning information. And they have been able to generate a little bit of a following, admittedly a super niche following,
yeah,
but generate a following among financial advisors and other attorneys who are genuinely interested in like learning the subject matter because they can use it themselves. Um, but like you're absolutely right. Like nobody cares if I'm out there like teaching like probate rules and stuff like that.
yeah.
And that's
Well, I think you're right. I think it all depends. I think it also depends on who your following is. If you have,
yeah,
if you're a strong following of just people in your specific practice area, then you're going to get more engagement on more specific content produced for them, right? But
yeah,
I feel like my following is probably, all over the board, right? From every industry. Probably not even a whole lot of like, probate and estate plan people even in my following. So,
yeah,
a lot of business owners like type stuff, so
yeah. Well, no, you're absolutely right. It depends on who you're following is like whether because obviously the people who are generating content that's specific on estate tax issues, nobody other than other financial advisors and CP and attorneys are going to care about that. So it really depends. Um, so I think we're coming up on time here for the week. Um, I let's talk up for a minute about tip of the week. So I have it's more of a it's kind of a large tip, but I think it's important. And I want to talk for a minute about email. I hear a lot of people struggling with email and wanted to give some general principles more than like, oh, you should use this or that to resolve your email. Just thinking about some more general principles. And the first step I think is when trying to deal with email is reduce the demand for email. So your clients have a certain, like if you think of it in supply and demand terms, they have a certain demand for you answering questions, and you're not meeting that demand. So right now, the cost of transacting that information is very high. It's a big pain in the butt for you to be generating all these emails, responding to all their questions. So what you need to do is reduce the demand for email, and the way that you do that is by answering their questions before they ask them. So like you talked about, sending the PDF, like what to do when people die. Um, covering all the basics, sending some kind of email sequence, like as the case moves through a phase, or a text message that says, "Hey, here's what just happened. Here's what you should expect for the next couple of weeks, or what's coming up, and here's what's going to happen next. This is the stuff that we need from you. Here's a couple of answers to frequently asked questions." Just covering everything that you can that's relevant to that phase of the case and answering the questions before they get to them. So, I mean, that is going to do in my opinion, a huge amount in terms of cutting back email is just answering questions before they ask. Another easy way to do it, record uh, a playlist of YouTube videos. For visual learners who don't like reading stuff, just record like 2, 3, 4 minute videos explaining, the steps, and they can watch as much or as little as they want or watch through it as they're going, things like that. And you can, even if you don't want to put it publicly, you can just have a privately listed video playlist and share it only with your clients in that introductory email. Just add a link to it to your onboarding email. Simple stuff. Create a PDF. If your practice type makes sense for it, you can consider a a portal. I know John's a big fan of their portal with K-Stack, or was it
Case status.
K-Status.
Yep.
Still using K-Status?
Yep. Love case status.
Yep. So you can consider looking at a portal to help, give more real-time updates as things move through phases, or if you're inputting status notes, for example, directly into a system, you could show them through your portal system. For longer term engagements, especially for like business clients, scheduling regular check-ins and asking them to kind of compile a list of questions. Or I know I've heard of people doing this in like the family law and divorce context, having them compile their questions and wait to discuss them until your regularly scheduled time. Another thing to consider. So that's kind of big category number one, reducing the demand for email. Those are a bunch of different things you can do. Step two would be making sure that inbound email is triaged very quickly, ideally automatically. So easiest ways to do that, rules. Use Gmail rules, use Outlook rules, as many as you can come up with to automatically sort, tag, label, assign emails, unsubscribe, things like that. And if you want to get real hacky, you can start adding AI into the picture and running them through ChatGPT, through Make.com or Zapier or something like that, and having the AI decide how to triage if it's something that might not fit into a role easily. Once it is triaged, last step number 3 is just make sure that when somebody is assigned on an email, for example, make sure that they know they're responsible for handling it, and ideally generate a task if there is a task associated in your project management system. So we're reducing the demand for email, triaging it to the stuff that does come in gets triaged quickly, and the people that are responsible for dealing with it know they are responsible, rather than, well, I don't know, there's 100 emails in there, I don't know whose job that is. It's not mine. I don't want to do that. Like, make sure the people know whose job it is to do the thing. And with those together, I think you should be able to cure a lot of your email-based woes if that is resonating with you out there. But that's my extended tip of the week. Got anything for us, John?
Yeah. So along the we talked about in today's episode, when it comes to marketing and using AI in marketing, is something I do quite often. I would say at least once a week. I'm looking to see how I'm doing in a marketing perspective on where I'm at, right? So I'm entering in keywords and seeing if I appear or if somebody else appears or how it is. So I'm on a real-time temperature of, where I'm currently at in, when it comes to search results, right? Whether it's through Google, whether it's through OpenAI or ChatGPT, the different models, asking it different prompts to see, if just like somebody in the public would say, hey, I need a probate lawyer for this or this county or this specific topic, or, whatever it is, where do I appear? Do I appear at all? And if not, why don't I appear? Right. So constantly doing those, but I think, we obviously, Google is important, is the number 1 search engine. Then we have YouTube is the number 2 search engine out there. Do you appear in YouTube as well? And then also, as these AI models, the O1 preview or just O1 and then 4.0, as they advance, who's appearing in those? Because people will use those as search engines, right? So how are you appearing? Are you number 1? Are you number 2, number 3, or are you just way down the list? And then you can kind of gauge and say, okay, well, I don't appear at all on YouTube, so I need to produce YouTube content. Or I don't appear at all on ChatGPT's 4.0 model. Why not? Because it's old data. Well, maybe I need to make some changes to try to get in that mix. So from a digital marketing perspective, just constantly auditing, but use the major search engines, and then also use ChatGPT to kind of as a baseline to see where you're currently at, and then you can kind of work from there to kind of go into a direction where you want to go.
On the topic of search engines, and you talk about YouTube being number 2. I was just curious, and I looked it up. Google or TikTok is now number 4 search engine in the world, behind only Google, Bing, and YouTube. So there's like over 1 billion users now or something like that on TikTok. So if you're not producing content on TikTok,
I have not.
You like recording videos and all that stuff, might be something to look at. But definitely, there's a lot of ground to cover just in Google search and YouTube search for sure. So different strokes for different folks, though. All right, that's it for this week, guys. I appreciate you tuning in. If if you got value out of this podcast, check out, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, so that other people can find us. If you want to take the conversation offline, feel free to join us in the Legal Tech Collective Facebook group, where we talk about AI and automation and technology things all the time. But that is it for this week. Until next time, John.
Awesome, Dan. Always a pleasure. See you next week.
Take it easy.